this is Rachel, long time no see. Thought I'd better make another video. It'll just be brief. I'm calling this one, The Governing Body Talks Too Much. Now, just to start out, I'd like to read some scriptures that I think most witnesses will be familiar with. First one is Proverbs chapter 10 and verse 19. It says, "When words are many, transgression cannot be avoided, but whoever controls his lips acts discreetly." Okay, and the next one is Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 3. It says here, "For a dream comes from too many preoccupations, and the chatter of the stupid ones comes from too many words." Then it goes on to say in verse 7, "For just as many preoccupations lead to dreams, so too many words lead to futility." Okay, is that the one that I wanted to read? I think so. Anyway, brain fart. Okay, so the point I'm trying to bring out in those verses is that basically the more you talk, the more you're likely going to say something that you later need to take back or retract. And this pretty much has been the problem with the organisation right back through the decades, right back to the beginning. Takes us back to the roots of the organisation when Charles Taze Russell basically started a publishing company, so Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. So he was in the business of producing biblical commentary, biblical based writings, which were purchased by people and distributed. So it was a publishing company, and we've seen throughout the decades since back then in the late 1800s, huge volumes of printed material come out of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. We know how many magazines we were getting every year. I mean, now it's trimmed down to one a month basically, but it used to be 4 a month, so you multiply that by 12 months. Then every year there were new releases of publications, and every few years they would change the main study Bible aid used for teaching people that were met in the ministry. So just a huge proliferation of reading materials, and it's crazy when you think about it. In the first 6 decades of Christianity, the only, it was about, I'll just hold my Bible up, where are we? Matthew. So this much written material produced in the first 6 decades of Christianity, and you look at what the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society publishing company has put out since that time. So the main thrust of the preaching work has always been to distribute literature produced by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. Of course, that's now a lot of it's still happening, of course, but a lot of the material now is just being produced online, and witnesses are encouraged to access it online rather than the hard copy printed material. So anyway, so getting back to what I was saying, in the abundance of words, there's bound to be mistakes made, and that's what we see. I was just going to point out a scripture that we used to use a lot, John 17:3. "This means everlasting life, they're taking in knowledge of you, the only true God and the one you sent forth, Jesus Christ," was really used as a reason for producing all this written material. Of course, now in the Revised New World Translation from 2013, they've changed that verse to read, "This means everlasting life, they're knowing you, the true God, and the one you sent forth, Jesus Christ." So it's really funny, because we used to meet people in the ministry who got their Bible translation out, and that's how it would render it, "knowing you," rather than taking in knowledge. And I remember saying, oh, well, our translation is a far more accurate and literal translation, and taking in knowledge means you've got to acquire information, you've got to take stuff in. It's not just as simple as knowing, whereas in fact the governing body has seen fit now to change it to knowing, which is actually a far more intimate thing than just having information about a person, isn't it? So that's a positive change that at least they've made. But this taking a knowledge business really was the backing behind having all, the scriptural backing behind having all this proliferation of stuff that, even witnesses can't keep up with reading all the material. And they probably still can't, even though it's been reduced and dumbed down quite a lot. So, another thing I was going to point out, and I've just got a few little notes here because I'm bound to my thoughts are bound to go off. Yes, so we have been, I'm just thinking of the 2012 District Convention it was, and there was a talk about spiritual light from Mother, where it was stressed that it's impossible to understand the Bible, which is spiritual father, without spiritual light from Mother. And of course the spiritual light that Mother produces is in the form of all this printed material, our Watchtower studies and stuff, and of course talks and things at conventions and assemblies. So it's been stressed that you have to have the provisions provided by Spiritual Mother, the organisation, to have an approved relationship with God, to get to know Him. So yes. Anyway, an example of how the governing body have talked too much, and of course not this current governing body alone, but just going right back through the history of the organisation, the leaders, the presidents, the ones who are responsible for producing the books and magazines, they used to write screeds and screeds about types and antitypes, and in recent years the current governing body has decided to basically, don't take any notice of that anymore, we're not going to follow along with that now. So there's an example of where in the past they've said too much, they've sort of provided too much detailed speculation on things, which didn't really have much scriptural backing behind them anyway. But at the 2014 annual general meeting, some members of the governing body sort of spoke about this, and it's quite interesting. I took some notes from that. I'd like to just read through some of them, so please bear with me. Okay, David Splain, he gave a talk called Types and Antitypes. This isn't a transcript of his talk, this is just my notes, so I'll just read my notes. The purpose of the talk is to explain why the organisation no longer refers so much to types and antitypes. He referred to the September 15th, 1950 Watchtower for the definition of types and antitypes. And he asked, who decides if something is a type? He quoted Brother Albert Schroeder, who said, we need to exercise great care when applying accounts in the Hebrew Scriptures as prophetic patterns or types, if the accounts are not applied in the Scriptures themselves. Then Brother Splain adds, what a beautiful statement. We agree with it. There is even a study called typology. He confessed that the early Bible students were also into finding types and antitypes in everything, as had been the Catholics, Jewish scholars and Protestants before them. He said, if a study of a certain subject makes chills run up and down your spine, could it possibly be mistaken? The answer is yes. He described some in the organisation as being engrossed with types and antitypes. He brought up Arch W. Smith, a Bible student, who studied typology as a hobby. His particular interest was the Pyramid of Giza, studying the measurements of its corridors, etc., which he wrote regularly to Bethel about. But Brother Splain didn't elaborate how Russell lapped this up and related its measurements to things then going on in the organisation, and then published those in books. He mentioned that in 1886, Russell produced a chart linking the ages of mankind to the Great Pyramid, and that Bible students referred to the pyramid as the Bible in stone. He said that in 1928, an article came out saying God did not need to have his plan in a monument built by pagans. Actually, that article says that Satan himself engineered the pyramid to mislead mankind, not that it was just built by pagans. Smith humbly accepted this new view. He let reason win out over emotion. But Brother Splain downplayed how involved the organisation was with pyramidology, that it was pushed by Russell and keenly adopted by all, and in circulation in publications in use even beyond 1928. In other words, it was believed during the time of the cleansing and refining of the Bible students, which was 1914 to 1919, and in the subsequent supposed appointing in 1919. And this is what Brother Splain says: "We simply cannot go beyond the things written." He went on to explain that Romans 15:4 shows the Hebrew scriptures are intended for us to learn from. He tried to remove the distinction in the application of certain parts to only the anointed or only the other sheep. Rather, they are for all people to apply principles from the scriptures to themselves. Okay, so his finishing comments: "We deeply appreciate the spiritual heritage passed on to us from the early Bible students. Do not despise the day of small things. However, the light gets brighter. We must follow the light wherever it leads us. Our love should be for the truth, not a particular doctrine." He confessed that the governing body even have trouble keeping up with the celestial chariot. "We're not driving the chariot. Jehovah is driving the chariot, and we're running just as fast as you are trying to keep up." I thought that was quite amusing. Anyway, so yeah, interesting there how, they've decided not to say that things are types or antitypes, that something in the scriptures has a further fulfillment unless it's specifically stated that it will do. But after having said this, they still do hold on to like the tree in Nebuchadnezzar's dream that gets chopped down, which clearly in Daniel it says that was fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar himself, that all that Daniel had prophesied would be fulfilled on Nebuchadnezzar. Yet the organisation still goes and says that it has another fulfillment. So they're really going against their own decision here to not do these types and antitypes unless they're specifically, in scripture that there's a specific indication that that's what they're supposed to be. But anyway, at the same annual general meeting, Stephen Lett also gave a talk. He was discussing a new understanding of the parable of the 10 virgins. This is one of the comments he made. "The faithful slave has come to realize there's no need to try to assign meaning to the numerous details in many of these parables or illustrations. The result is simpler, clearer, easier to understand, and even more powerful." So there's an admission really that in the past they've gone into far more detail than necessary. They've complicated matters. He says that the governing body are going for simpler explanations. They are not attempting to micro-analyze things, explaining all the details. He says the faithful and discreet slave have come to appreciate we don't have to explain all the details that could distract from the message. But you think, how many people over the decades have been disfellowshipped because they haven't agreed with some of these smaller details that the governing body has forced us all to accept. So we can see quite clearly then that the governing body, they have talked too much and now they're having to retract stuff. How much more will they retract and say, oh, well, we actually can't really say anything about that matter, and you know, it's up to you to determine for yourself what it actually means. But anyway, let's see what happens in the future if they simplify things even further. Okay, that's all. Bye.